Melech Choser Mashiach U'Magen. Melech Choser Mashiach U'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham. Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham. King, Redeemer, Savior and Shield. King, Redeemer, Savior and Shield. Blessed art thou, O Lord, blessed art thou, O Lord, Shield of Abraham. Blessed art thou, O Lord, blessed art thou, O Lord, Shield of Abraham. You are the mighty one forever, O Lord. You are the mighty one forever, O Lord. You raise the dead, sleeping in the graves. You are mighty to save. You raise the dead, sleeping in the graves. You are mighty to save. You are mighty to save. You are mighty to save. You are strong in my weakness. Out of pain I see rejoicing, for you rise out of brokenness. For you rise out of brokenness. And I will dance in the midst of the fire. I will sing in the eye of the storm. I will shout, you are faithful forever. Victory is mine, the battle is yours. From the valley there will come breakthrough. Hope will rise with our praises. Out of trials you bring redemption. You give beauty for ashes. And I will dance in the midst of the fire. I will sing in the eye of the storm. And I will shout, you are faithful forever. Victory's mine, the battle is yours. And I will dance in the midst of the fire. I will sing in the eye of the storm. I will shout, you are faithful forever. The victory's mine, 'cause the battle is yours. Give thanks to the Lord, He is good, He is good. Hodu l'Adonai Kitov. Give thanks to the Lord, He is good, He is good. Hodu l'Adonai Kitov. Give thanks to the Lord, He is good, He is good. Hodu l'Adonai Kitov. Give thanks to the Lord, He is good, He is good. Hodu l'Adonai Kitov. And I will dance in the midst of the fire. I will sing in the eye of the storm. And I will shout, you are faithful forever. Victory's mine, and the battle is yours. And I will dance fire. I will sing in the eye of the storm, and I will shout, you are faithful forever. Victory's mine, the battle is yours. The victory's mine, the battle is yours. The victory's mine, the battle is yours. Make my life your temple, Lord, at this season start. Pull down every idol I have raised up in my heart on this Hanukkah, on this feast of dedication. I dedicate myself to you. So take my defiled altar, come and cleanse and come repent. So every time I falter, I can run to meet you there on this Hanukkah, on this feast of dedication. I dedicate myself to you. And with every candle on the menorah that illuminates the night comes a prayer you'd kindle in me, Yeshua, a desire for your fire, for your light. So make of my mortal body a house worthy of your name, and rid me of what's ungodly and every hidden thing of shame on this Hanukkah, on this feast of dedication. I dedicate myself to you. So take my supply of oil, not enough to burn long, I fear. But oh, how I pray I may one day say, a great miracle happened here on this Hanukkah, on this feast of dedication. I dedicate myself to you. I dedicate myself to you.
give anybody one more thing to do. We didn't prepare words to be displayed, but some of you will know the words to Ma'o Tzur. And as I heard it on Shabbat, there's several languages in here that can be sung to Ma'o Tzur. So if you want to sing it in English, Hebrew, Polish, or Yiddish, or Spanish, and I don't think I missed any, feel free. Where's your, oh, you didn't bring your music up.
Oh.
All right. Hanukkah, and I never heard any words to it, but I'm assuming there might be, so feel free. We're going to go through this one 2 times.
Really stunning. That was really incredible. That was beautiful, wasn't it? Wasn't that great? All right, we're going to dismiss our children now. And so children, you are free to go with Rabbi and Casey to Shabbat school and to Hag Sameach, everyone. Hag Sameach. I'm grateful to be here. It was a busy weekend. As you all prayed, and as you all can tell, I've made it this far. I drove up and back to Orlando this weekend, and then I was adding up the hours, and I was like, wait, that was like 17 hours in a car in 4 days. I bring it on myself, I think. But I'm grateful for your prayers, of which there were many. It was a good conference. There was some real fruit that came out of it, some real good connections, and it was a good time. So thank you for all of your support that enables that to happen. There is a recording of my teaching. If you're interested in my teaching, you can come to me and talk about how to listen to that. I spoke on
just our congregational experience coming out of the hurricane and being reconfigured and retooled in the kingdom of God and being reinvented in the kingdom of God. As I told you all, I believe that Hurricane Ian was our COVID 2.0. We were reconfigured during COVID, and now we're being reconfigured again. And that we are now a ministry on the move. We are following the cloud, and it leads and we follow. And just like Abraham went through the wilderness, or went through the land of Canaan, homeless, and he was a blessing to the nations as he went. That's our position now, to be a blessing to this Gentile Christian church, and that's what we do. And we're very grateful for the opportunity to do just that. So that all being said, now we've arrived at Hanukkah. And I want to speak to you a little bit about Hanukkah. Unfortunately, this week I made the mistake of studying some things by Rabbi at Shalom, and that just ruins me because he tends to go real deep, real fast. And so now I have all these questions in my mind. But rather than drag you through that sort of journey, unless you want to go through that journey, in which case you can meet with me sidebar and we can discuss things like how we ended up with an 8-day holiday in the first place, and what the miracle really was, and why does Josephus seem to not know what the holiday is all about. So we could talk about that if you like. Yeah, there you go. We've just begun, haven't we? It's all over now. It's just done. I've ruined it. In fact, I started talking to Sydney, because Sydney's home from holiday, and I started talking to her about this afternoon, and it's like, oh, wait, no, don't take my holiday. It wasn't quite that bad, but I could see the tremors beginning. But anyway, it's a good discussion, and I'm so incredibly grateful for our tradition where we can discuss things, because when you get down to it, the questions are legitimate and are valid. So anyway, that being said, let me get going tonight and take what time we have. How did we end up with an 8-day holiday at the beginning of winter? How did we end up with a holiday juxtaposed with Christmas and compared to the Christmas tradition, to be honest, about the phenomenon of modernity, where this Hanukkah is juxtaposed with Christmas? This is one of the 2 non-Torah holidays that are primarily celebrated in the diaspora. That is, of course, Hanukkah and Purim. These are determined by tradition and custom, but they are no less significant than the other Torah holidays. By the other Torah holidays, I mean Pesach and Shavuot and Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. This holiday is no less significant for its theological value, for its gospel value of teaching us the gospel of Yeshua, of salvation in Yeshua. No less significant for binding our community together to give us a place to worship and to celebrate. This holiday is just as significant in that respect. This holiday is a praise, and let me start by saying it that way. In our family, when the kids were growing up, what we would do is we would have a different child tell the story of Hanukkah every night, and for 8 nights we would do this, and we would light the candle, and each person would take a turn lighting that night's candle or candles, and then they would tell the story. And the nice thing about that is everybody gets a chance to tell the story, and by the end of the week, you've got the story pretty well flushed out, and everybody has remembered the story very well. But let me do that with you, if you don't mind, just to tell you the story of Hanukkah, because that's just a nice way to do this. So most of us remember a fellow named Alexander the Great, somewhat significant person in world history. Alexander the Great conquered the known world, but then he went and died without appointing a successor. And so there were 4 generals who divided up his conquests. They began to rule. One of these generals ruled over generally the area of Judea and Samaria and Syria. And this one was of a group called the Seleucids. And they began to rule over Judea. And what they did is they proceeded to outlaw the practice and study of Torah. It's fascinating because Alexander the Great was actually one of the few Greeks who was very positive towards the temple and towards the priestly line. In fact, he came, the legend goes, he came to conquer the temple, to take ownership of it, and probably to do some sort of pagan sacrifice in it. And the high priest, recognizing the value of this moment, came out in all his full Yom Kippur costume and confronted Alexander the Great. And the legend goes that Alexander the Great was so overwhelmed by the pageantry and by the beauty and the majesty of the high priest that he turned around and let the temple stand. Now, that's the legend, and the story goes. In any case, what we know from history is that the Seleucid outlawed the practice and the study of Torah. They took over the temple. They installed their own priests. We have references of a pig being sacrificed on the altar, that an altar was raised to Zeus, a statue of Zeus was raised in the temple, and generally desecrated the temple. The primary bad actor of this era was a fellow named Antiochus. Antiochus, of course, was named, he named himself Epiphanes, or Epiphanes, Antiochus Epiphanes, which means the appearance of God, meaning that he was an appearance of God, and that's the arrogance and audacity of his position there. And he set himself up as a god to be worshipped thereof. The Jews of the time named him Antiochus Epiphanes, which means Antiochus the madman. So the story goes, and this is the way that we tell it. There's a few different versions out there, but this is the way that we tell the story. And that is that at one time there were statues of either Zeus or Antiochus being taken out to the outlying villages, and the village would be given a chance to worship and, of course, bring money to worship this statue. And there was some discomfort with this, and great pushback to this. And one fellow, this priest, one of the Maccabees, a priest, objected to this and said he wasn't going to bow down and worship. And the government official took him aside and said, "Look, we will guarantee that you will become a high priest, and we'll guarantee your place in the temple if you would bow down and worship this statue and lead your village in worship." And of course he refused. And another under official said, "Well, if he won't do it, I will." So he came over to bow down, and this Maccabean priest promptly grabbed a sword and killed the man who had dared to worship this statue. And then him and his sons ran into the hills and began a guerrilla campaign, which was ultimately successful. And that's kind of the first miracle, is that there was a guerrilla campaign that was successful against the Seleucids. There were some lucky wins and some things like this that allowed that to happen. And so eventually the temple was taken back, and they set about the task of cleansing the temple. And so the story goes from there. We have the other miracles that are involved. They found one vial of oil for the temple menorah, and that one vial of oil had the seal of the high priest on it, and there was a process that it took to make more oil, and that process would take approximately 7 or 8 days, and so they only had enough oil for one day, and so they lit the menorah, and the menorah stayed lit miraculously through the 8 days until they could prepare more oil in the proper fashion. We shouldn't be surprised at this sort of story because we've got other examples of lights that burn. For example, we've got the burning bush, right? The burning bush is what? It's a bush that's burning, but it's not consumed. In the same way, if you look real close at the wick and the flame, you'll notice that the wick comes up and the flame actually curls around the wick. The wick is not actually consumed, except over a great deal of time it begins to degrade and burn down. But what's burning is not the cloth wick. What's burning is the gasified wax. The wax turns into molten liquid, then the liquid turns into gas, and it's actually the gas that creates the flame that you see. So technically, in a scientific way, if you could see it that way, the wick isn't even burning. But just like the bush that was burning on the mount, right? The bush it wasn't consumed. It was looking like a candle. You're looking into the fire and you're seeing, wait, this bush is not burning up. What else did we have? For example, we had the mountain later with the people of Israel at the base of the mountain. The mountain was burning. It was on fire. It's described as being on fire, but it was not consumed. So we have this recurring theme, and the Hanukkah theme of the oil lasting 8 days. I mean, there's a couple different options here, right? It could be that the oil was being replenished miraculously so that it's like an endless oil, or it could be that it's burning, but the oil is not being consumed. Do you see that? So that's how we look at that. So in any case, the oil lasted 8 days. That's the legend, and that's where we light our 8 days worth of candles according to that. Okay. Backing up a little, so that generally tells the story of Hanukkah. A couple other little sidebars. when they were not allowed to teach Torah under the Seleucids, what they would do is they would meet in the city streets, and you'd have little teachers teaching Torah to small groups, and when the soldiers came by, they would pretend to be gambling. And that's how they were able to teach Torah in the streets and do that. And so we have a dreidel game that's a bit like gambling, and the legend and the suggestion is that this is an imitation of what they were doing then. Again, these are traditions and legends and stories, and they're great to talk about, but we have very little historical basis for which to really believe in them. So it comes down to custom and tradition is what it is. And it's a custom and a tradition that makes a great vehicle for telling the story, and it makes a great vehicle for connecting ourselves to another moment in history. Because historically, the historical fact is the Seleucids were tyrants over the Jews, and the Seleucids set themselves up in the temple. Antiochus Epiphanes is a man of documented history. He set himself up in the temple. He desecrated the temple, and we have extensive biblical references about desecrating the temple. Therefore, that part of the story is absolutely valid and factual. We have perhaps embellished it or decorated it with the beauty of our holiday. And we remember it, and then we talk about it, and we say they tried to kill us, God delivered us, let's eat. It's the pattern of every Jewish holiday. So we're looking forward to that in a few minutes. But before we quite get there, let me finish a few more comments. Incidentally, this expression of Antiochus setting himself up in the temple as an idol to be worshipped, or setting himself up as the appearance of God, this is an expression of an anti-Messiah. We have these expressions of an anti-Messiah throughout the biblical record and throughout history, human history. Examples of anti-Messiah are one who sets himself up as a Messiah or sets himself up as a savior of peoples, sets himself up in opposition to God as an ultimate authority, as an ultimate sort of transcendent power. There's always a sense of the transcendent involved in this. From Daniel chapter 9, speaking of this anti-Messiah, chapter 9, verse 27, he will make a strong covenant with leaders for 1 week. For half the week, he'll put a stop to the sacrifice and the grain offering. So this is what we see, that Antiochus did indeed put a stop to the sacrifice and to the grain offering. On the wing of detestable things, the desolator will come and continue until the already decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator. So Adonai is speaking of the things that will come. He will do detestable things, and then the destruction that is foretold will come and pour out on him. From Matthew 24, we have another reference of this. This is Yeshua teaching from verse 15. When you see the abomination that causes devastation spoken about through the temple, through the prophet of Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, this will be the time for those in Yehuda to escape to the hills. So what Yeshua is talking about here is, let me read this again, and this again is coming from Matthew chapter 24. When you see the abomination that causes devastation spoken about through the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, in other words, this abomination will be in the holy place, this will be the time for those in Yehuda to escape to the hills. What have we just described? Many of us read that and we think, okay, there's going to be a time someday where there's a temple and it's going to be devastation and desolation, and the people in Israel are going to escape to the hills. But actually what we've just read is a kind of reference to Hanukkah. It's kind of a reference to what just took place under the Seleucids, which is fascinating. That's not to say, okay, and I'll talk about this, so don't get lost on the track here. That's not to say that there isn't going to be a time in the future wherein we will see this happen again. And in fact, what do we see replicated throughout history? What is it that we see? We see Herod declaring himself a god, the voice of a god and not a man, they said of him, and he thought that was really good, and he sat down in the chair and reveled in that. And then a little while later, he died from worms in his stomach. Caesar Nero thought he was a god. We've got numerous bad actors, characters in history who have thought themselves on that level and opposed God on that level. And so, yes, a simple one note of clarification, if I can, to interrupt myself, sorry. So the Christian perspective of prophecy and apocalyptic literature and prophetic books in the Bible, the Christian approach to that seems to be largely to figure out what's going to happen, to predict the future, essentially. And there's a great deal of discussion and books that are written and much talking and pontificating about what means what and what's going to happen in the future. That's the Christian approach to it. But let me suggest to you and help you understand that the Jewish or Hebrew approach to prophecy is not to tell you what's going to happen, it's to explain what just did happen. In other words, when Yeshua is born in Matthew, what do we see repeated over and over again? This happened to fulfill. This was to fulfill. This was because this was said. And it has all these references to prophecies that Matthew is saying, this is what just happened. The Mashiach is here in the birth of Yeshua. See this prophecy and this prophecy and this prophecy. So Matthew is essentially saying, this is what just happened. And so this Daniel prophecy that Yeshua is quoting is in a sense saying, this is what just happened. Yeshua is saying, this is what happened according to the prophetic understanding of, and I believe, the narrative of the Seleucids. But again, don't get lost on the track here. This is what we see in Jewish prophecy is cycles, repetition. These things keep repeating over and over and over again. So if we know what happened once, and we know what happened again, and we know what happened multiple times in history, what do we know? It'll probably happen again, right? And then if we look at that from an eschatological viewpoint, that is that Yeshua is coming back and these things must take place before that time, then we can expect that these things are going to happen again. Okay, Daniel 11, verse 29, just by virtue of reference to this. At the time designated, he will come back to the south, that is speaking of the anti-Messiah. But this time things will turn out differently than before because ships from Kittim will come against him. His courage will fail him. In retreat, he will take furious action against the Holy Covenant, again showing favor to those who abandon the Holy Covenant. Armed forces will come at his order and profane the sanctuary and the fortress. They will abolish the daily burnt offering and set up the abomination that causes desolation. So we've got the anti-Messiah appearing during the time of the Seleucids, appearing during the time of Yeshua at the destruction of the temple, and then we see these prophecies not yet complete, and so we can expect that they're going to happen again. But what of this super prophetic end times apocalyptic narrative holiday? That is this Hanukkah, when we have an anti-Messiah. I mean, even in Purim, we don't have the same sort of theme of the anti-Messiah setting himself up in the temple as we do during Hanukkah. So what do we think about that? Is there a possibility that this narrative could be repeated again? If it does get repeated, what do we need in place? What do we need in order to repeat this sort of scenario? Well, we need a temple, and we need restored sacrifice. And I know that this position is not very popular. Let's see. Let me make a list. This position of the temple being rebuilt and of sacrifices continuing. That position is not popular with A, the Christians, B, most of Israel, C, many of the Jews, certain vectors of orthodoxy, at least the Hasids and some of the Hasids in the land. So this is not a popular opinion, but I'll throw it out there just the same because I'm not really interested in being popular, as it were. Here's my take on it, is that, and this is a poor reason to stand on theology or prophecy, but that it needs to complete the cycle. Things need to complete. I see a repetition. I see a cyclicality. And yes, we want to see that, number one. Number two, let's consider the example of Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh's heart was hardened, it says, numerous times in the text, right? Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And I've spoken on this and taught on this. My understanding of that phrase is that Pharaoh had a heart to do evil and wickedness, and Adonai supported his heart and encouraged him to be what he wanted to be. And the metaphor that I've used for this, the story that I've used for this illustration, is that of a boxer who's in a ring, and he's going, it would be like me going up against the super heavyweight champion of the world. And they tell me, if you win this fight, you will be the champion. And so I say, okay, I'm willing to take that on. Let's try that and see how that goes. And the first round, I get my clock cleaned. I just get myself beat up, right? And I stumble back to my corner, and my trainer comes out, And he's like, you're not going to do this. You're going to kill yourself. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I am. And then the super heavyweight champion of the world comes across and he says something to me. He says, you know what? I think you almost got in a lucky punch. You might be able to do this. And then you get to be super heavyweight champion of the world. What do you think? You want to give it a try? Would you like to do that? And I think, you know what? I want to take him. I want to take him so much, I'm going to do another round. And so I go back in for round 2 and I get cleaned out again, right? And after round 2, he comes to me and he says, hey, you were really close that time. Would you like to go another round? Because if you get in one good punch, you might be able to do this. That's what happened with Pharaoh and the plagues. His heart was hardened at each round, right? At each plague. So this is my logic, at least, and I know we got to be careful with our logic because it's human. But things are pretty bad out there, but they're not as bad as they could be. I mean, it could get a lot worse. I dare say the enemy, the accuser of the brethren, if the enemy gets taken out now, he's got a certain bone to pick. He's got a certain complaint that I think might be valid. He didn't get a chance to do as much as he wanted to do. Things aren't as bad as he wanted to be. The world hasn't followed after evil and wickedness as much as it wants to. We're still kind of stuck in this sort of Christian, historical, sort of mythological, cultural bases, much of the world. So here's my point, is that there's more to come. The enemy's got more to come. He's got more to give. And so Adonai is going to let him do that. Adonai is going to let him harden his heart and go there. And we're going to see an anti-Messiah. Right now, who's the anti-Messiah? Now, if you go with the Jesuits, they don't believe that there's one. The Jesuits believe that there are many. The reason the Jesuits believe there are many is because they don't want the Pope to be the anti-Messiah. They don't want you to think the Pope is the anti-Messiah. So they teach that there are many anti-Messiahs. And actually, that's a historically accurate biblical perspective. There are multiple anti-Messiahs. I believe that too. However, I also believe there's one character who's going to wrap it all together and get it done. And it would be like a Caesar Nero for our day. And for that matter, maybe it'll be Caesar Nero who had a head wound and he could be resurrected. And if you'd like to discuss that further, we can discuss that. But that being said, we haven't seen the worst case scenario. We haven't seen the real anti-Messiah. At least not that he's been given his full reign yet. And so I think that could come. And so the man of lawlessness who brings peace and then destruction will come is the person that we're waiting for. But prior to the man of lawlessness, what else do we need to have happen? We need to have a temple rebuilt and the sacrifices restored. Or at least there's some sort of order in there which must be accomplished. Okay. The deception of this age, of our people, this age, this epoch of history, the primary deception vis-a-vis Adonai is that Adonai is irrelevant. Many people believe that he doesn't exist, or at least believe that he's not relevant. It doesn't matter. But understand that the ultimate deception is going to be that the world can conquer Adonai. This deception that we're in right now is that Adonai either doesn't exist or he's irrelevant. But nobody really thinks they can beat Adonai. Nobody really thinks that. Understand that that's what he does. The anti-Messiah will gather the nations to come against Yeshua in Israel, and Yeshua will come out and wage war. That's what's coming. So as you look around the world right now, there are a few things that need to fall into place before we see this absolute scenario take place. Okay. In the meantime, tyranny and oppression will come. We will face days of greater oppression. Some around the world are already experiencing this. All right, so what do we do with where we are in the kingdom of Adonai right now? If we see the writing on the wall and we see that there's a tyranny and there's an oppression, there's something coming, then the wise man prepares himself for that. The wise man prepares himself for that tyranny and that oppression. And this is my concern, is that the goal of much of Adonai, the goal of much of the kingdom, as it is understood right now, is to, in a sense, invent a godless spirituality. There's a spirituality that is evident in all people who align themselves with God. There is a transcendent spirituality that is practiced and understood there. But see, and this is what my judgment is to this day and age, and that is there is a sense of godlessness to it, because at the end of it, it's all about self. It's all about affirming self or encouraging self or healing self or these kinds of things. You see that, in a sense, marriage works when both partners are willing to be selfless about it. Marriage doesn't work when both partners are just working on themselves. Then it's just a partnership. And you can get that at the fitness center. You can go hire a partner who will be your partner in your health. And that's all that is. But in a sense, there's a selflessness that is required to our relationship with Adonai, the same way there's a selflessness that's required in our marriages. See, this is my opinion, and this is going to offend some people, I'm sure. I'm going to offend a lot of people tonight, aren't I? Wow. We have 3 epochs of human history without a temple. Apparently, Adonai is okay with us not having a temple. Apparently, he's okay with that, because we've had 3 major epochs of human history without a temple. What is our opposition to tyranny? What is our response to tyranny? Our response to tyranny is courage and fearlessness, even during those times when our temple is destroyed. It is courage and fearlessness even in those times when the infrastructure of our faith is not available to us. And this is one of the big takeaways, of course, of our experience with the storm. Where is your faith when your marriage fails? Where is your faith when your church or your synagogue fails? Where is your faith when your friends fail you? Or your leader, your rabbi, fails you? Where is your faith when your health fails you? See, in one sense, it was a noble thing for the Maccabees to regain the temple and cleanse it and dedicate it. But for us, the lesson of this season is dedication of our home, our house, because that's really all we can be responsible for. You see, the infrastructure, as we understand it, of Western spirituality, which is largely church and synagogue, let's just be honest about it, the infrastructure may fail. It may be unavailable to us. And that's one of the takeaways of the season of Hanukkah. Everything was taken away. They couldn't practice Torah. They couldn't keep Torah. They couldn't teach. They couldn't learn. They couldn't study. They couldn't pray. And so they tried to play little games with it, but that hardly counts, right? In our other building, what we had was we had a first night and an eighth night. Here in this building, we got the third night. We're making it work, but it's less than I'm used to. It's less than I'm accustomed to. I would like us to get together for another night. It's kind of fun for me. But that infrastructure has passed. For some reason, that infrastructure is removed from us. And now we're doing things to set up here and so forth and so on. So yeah, there's an infrastructure challenge there that is attendant. How do you overcome that? And the courage of celebration of Hanukkah is an example for us. So ancient Roman armies had a trick. They would take their spears and they would have a cup on the end of their spears. And then when they set up camp, when the battle was done, they take their spears and they drive them into the ground, point first. And the cup up in the air, they fill with oil and put a little wick in it and they light it. And that becomes the light. Now, some people have conjectured that perhaps the lights of Hanukkah were the lights in the temple courtyard, that they took the spears and drove them into the ground and filled the cups with oil. as they lit up this courtyard. The lights referenced by Josephus were likely lights that were lit in the courtyard and the surrounding grounds of the temple in similar fashion, as a reminder to when the Hasmoneans and the Maccabees defeated the Seleucids under Antiochus. These lights are a source of courage to us in this age as we face our own tyranny and oppression, and as we face the moving target of cultural hate of Adonai. And we also face the wrath and deception in the attacks of the enemy. We struggle. And every one of us has a struggle. I heard a story today of a young lady who was confronted in a very violent and almost certainly demonic way. And those things are on the fringe. They're not the common experience of all of us. And yet at the same time, all of us have been rattled by things that have happened to us. We face the wrath and deception of this age, but we also face the wrath and deception of the spiritual realm. Ephesians chapter 6. Finally, grow powerful in union with the Lord and union with his mighty strength. Use all the armor and weaponry that God provides so that you will be able to stand against the deceptive tactics of the adversary. What is the armor and weaponry that God provides? Most people think of that in terms of spiritual verse memorization, Bible memorizations, or these kinds of things. Let me suggest to you that it's also community. Your community life. Did you get beat up this week? I'm glad you're here. I hope you get blessed by our service. Do you have a spiritual attack, a demonic attack, a full frontal attack on you or your business or your position in culture and society or government? Yes, I'm not surprised, because the enemy has a target on all of us. And I'm glad you're here, and I hope this is a blessing. If this gathering ceases to be a blessing to you when you stumble in here, then we can all disband and go join the Kiwanis or something, I don't know, some other club, because this is not a club. This has to be a place of spiritual blessing and spiritual encouragement. To that end, we have to accept each other where we're at. You see, I have a thing, like I have groups that I meet with, and I arrange these groups when I can. We got kind of blown away by the hurricane. But I arrange these groups not by spiritual maturity, but by intensity. And so I don't mind having somebody who's a baby believer with somebody who's been a believer for 40 years if they both have the same intensity. If they both want to know and are driving and pushing and pressing and learning and wanting to draw closer. Because that's what we're doing here. We're gathering together to draw, to near, to strive, to find, to seek, and not to yield, as Tennyson said. Grow powerful in union with the Lord, in union with his mighty strength. Use all the weaponry that Adonai provides so that you will be able to stand against the deceptive tactics of the adversary. Make no mistake, the adversary is a deceiver. He will deceive you. He will deceive you with pride. He will deceive you with tricks. He doesn't play fair. He doesn't fight fair. Verse 12, we are not struggling against human beings, but against the rulers, authorities, and cosmic powers governing this darkness. And to that end, I would add, yeah, some of us are struggling with human beings, but there is oftentimes a spiritual power behind the human being. And you may not have picked a fight, but the fight's already been declared. So take every piece of war equipment that Adonai provides so that when the evil day comes, you'll be able to resist, and when the battle is won, you'll still be standing. Therefore, stand. Have the belt of truth buckled around your waist, put on righteousness for a breastplate, and wear on your feet the readiness that comes from the good news of shalom. Always carry the shield of trust with which you'll be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of deliverance along with the sword given by the Spirit, that is the word of God, as you pray at all times with all kinds of prayers and requests in the Spirit, vigilantly and persistently for all God's people. If we could acquire one verse in nearly all the New Testament, I think it might be that one. Because this is the truth of it. Your faith is in the balance, and your faith is being attacked. All right, one last point. This is Hanukkah in this time of the year. Remember, the Torah is largely organized around agrarian themes of harvest. So there are three principal harvests in Israel. The first harvest is the harvest of wheat. The second harvest is the harvest of grapes. And the third harvest is the harvest of olives. And these take place at different times throughout the year. The symbol of wheat is the sheaf, right? The symbol of grapes is the vine cluster, the vine and the cluster, right? And the symbol for olives is the tree. And it is interesting to me that these three symbols represent us as a people. We are the sheaf, we are the harvest, and we are the branches of the vine, and we bring forth the fruit, and we are branches in the tree, the olive tree. And I just thought that was a good way to remember this festival time as the final harvest of the year. And I think those three harvests, those three understandings, are also represented in our growth. The wheat harvest being the first harvest of the year, that's like the salvation harvest, when you just come into the kingdom and you know. And then the grape harvest is knowing that we are to bring forth the fruit of the vine, bring forth the beauty, and then the olive coming off of the tree. Some of these olive trees are 1,500 and 2,000 years old. That is the legacy of the tree of Adonai that we are grafted into, all of us. Because it is not just the Gentile who's grafted, it is also the Jew who believes in Yeshua who's grafted. So there we are. May you be blessed this Hanukkah season. This is a season of great hostility in history, and it's also a season of delight and wonder and beauty. These candles have all burned down low, but tomorrow we light another candle. Another quick note on this, if I can, very quickly. In the temple, we had the menorah, and the menorah had a side to it, and in the language of Hebrew, it is paneh, face. The menorah had a face. And likewise, the bread of the presence also had a face to it. It was to face a certain direction. And so as you light these candles, consider what is the presence you are showing the world. It is the face of the menorah that is open to the world. It is in the eyes that we see a person's soul. It is in the face that we see who a person is, what their character is. And so understand that what you are presenting to the world through these Hanukkah lights, through these Hanukkot, is just that. It is the face of our faith, of our relationship with God, of the history of our people, our tradition, our custom, and everything that Adonai has called us to. Hag Sameach, everyone. Hag Hanukkah Sameach. Thank you. We're going to continue with the Vehi She'amda. The Vehi She'amda is a chorus that is popular in Israel. However, it's popular during the Pesach season. But because the words are so profound and so beautiful, I wanted to, we tend to do it on Hanukkah in our tradition. So. She'amda lavotenu, Vehi she'amda lavotenu velanu, shelo echad bilvad amar alenu lechalotenu, amar alenu lechalotenu. Vehi she'amda lavotenu, Vehi she'amda lavotenu velanu, shelo echad bilvad amar
aleinu lechalotenu. Amar aleinu lechalotenu. Ve'akadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu, matzilenu miyadam. Ve'akadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu, matzilenu miyadam. Lavotenu velanu, shelo echad bilvad, amar aleinu lechalotenu, amar aleinu lechalotenu. Ve'akadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu, matzilenu miyadam. Ve'akadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu, matzilenu miyadam.
Light one candle for the Maccabee children. Give thanks that their light didn't die. Light one candle for the pain they endured when their right to exist was denied. Light one candle for the terrible sacrifice justice and freedom demand. Light one candle for the wisdom to know when the peacemaker's time is at hand. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Light one candle for the strength that we need to never become our own foe. And light one candle for those who are suffering pain we learned so long ago. Light one candle for all we believe in. Let anger not tear us apart. Light one candle to bind us together with peace as the song in our hearts. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. What is the memory that's valued so highly that we keep it alive in the flame? What's the commitment to those who have died? When we cry out, they've not died in vain. We have come this far, always believing that justice will somehow prevail. This is the burden, this is the promise, and this is why we will not fail. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out. It's lasted for so many years. Don't let the light go out. Let it shine through our love and our tears. Don't let the light go out. Don't let the light go out. Don't let the light go out.
That concludes our Hanukkah this year. We're going to break now and go to the fellowship hall and have a meal.
Excuse me,
that,
Rabbi.
First.
We're not quite finished.
Yeah, I gathered we're not quite done.
So this clamor arose in the congregation one more time. And we wanted to express our appreciation for all that you and Casey have done, particularly to hold us together through all this time. So, we make sure that you don't know this is coming.
Wow.
So your congregation has donated and will probably continue for the next meeting or two, who knows? But when all things are said and done, they'll all be said and done. But do we love our rabbi?
Thank you. That's very sweet. Actually, I had one. Oh, thank you.
You have to see what's in it.
Okay, I'm going to see what's in it. Do you want to come up here? It's got your name on it. Might as well. It's very pretty. Oh, it's got gelt. It's very sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. That's very sweet. All right. But there is one more thing. Wait, now there's one more thing. So Adam and Zachary and Adam have decided to do something for you, and so they would like to share that with you now. There's one more?
I'm doing one on my own.
Okay. Okay, thank you all for coming, and may Adonai bless you with the balance of this week. We'll see you all on Shabbat, hopefully, and may Adonai keep you and guide you wherever you go. We're going to go into the fellowship hall now and enjoy a little fellowship time and some dessert. So thank you all. Hag Sameach.
And there are dreidels and
Yes, we have